Hello everyone, today is March 24th, 2019, around 3:17 p.m. I just got off an F train at the J Street Metrotech station, served by the A, C, F, and R trains. The R train's on a separate platform, but I'm going to be starting this walking video of downtown Brooklyn, Dumbo, Brooklyn Heights, and maybe Brooklyn Bridge Park as well. So I'm getting off the Fulton Street and J Street Northwest corner exit. Outside temperature is sunny and 54 degrees Fahrenheit. So very comfortable springtime weather. So this is downtown Brooklyn and the Fulton Mall, which is also called Fulton Street. It's called the Fulton Mall because regular motor vehicle traffic isn't allowed on this street, only New York City buses, and it's a major shopping street. So this street, Fulton Street, was actually named after the Robert Fulton, who had a Fulton landing at the end of Brooklyn and connected Brooklyn to Manhattan. They would be the first ever New York City commuters. Back then, Brooklyn and Manhattan were separate cities, and it was only a part of Brooklyn, which is the downtown area, that encompassed the whole city. It wasn't as large as the Brooklyn we know today. Brooklyn today is actually the most populous borough in New York City. Back then it was Manhattan. And actually, if you were to make Brooklyn its own city, Brooklyn would be the third largest city in the United States. Pretty crazy if you ask me.
Baby, everything.
So there's some audible pedestrian signals. The city has these in order to guide the hard of seeing and the blind. So I'm walking north on J Street right now. This protected bike lane on J Street is actually a recent addition by the city. In the recent years they added this because there were a lot of bicycle crashes and fatalities along the street. Whether or not this protected bike lane increases safety is debatable, but I definitely enjoy it, and I think it's a welcome addition for sure. So downtown Brooklyn is actually a very developed office and commercial area. A lot of these buildings around me are actually owned by NYU, New York University. It's a growing hub for education around this area. Since downtown Brooklyn was rezoned in 2004, there's been a major transformation in the area, with $9 billion of private investment and $300 million in public improvements. So if that just goes to show you that New York is always improving. Brooklyn was actually inhabited by the Lenape Native Americans until the 17th century, and the Dutch arrived in Brooklyn. They named the area Brooklyn, I don't know if I'm saying that right, after the village of the same name. But throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, Brooklyn developed very quickly. Here's the NYU Tandon School of Engineering Brooklyn campus. The main campus of NYU is in Greenwich Village in Manhattan. Previously, this university was known as Brooklyn Poly. It had many names throughout the years, but it's historically always been named Brooklyn Poly. So as the population of Brooklyn grew, there was definitely a demand for a bridge to connect Brooklyn and Manhattan, then known as New York. It was the city of New York and the city of Brooklyn. So originally it was called the New York and Brooklyn Bridge and the East River Bridge, but it was dubbed the name Brooklyn Bridge after a name coming from a January 25th, 1867 letter to the editor of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle. And the Brooklyn Bridge officially opened on May 24th, 1883, 135 years ago. It's amazing that bridge is that old. I'm actually walking towards it right now in that general direction. I'll show you just a little bit of the Brooklyn Bridge. I won't be crossing it today. So here's another college in the area. This is City Tech. It's part of the CUNY system, the City University of New York. Long Island University also has a campus in downtown Brooklyn. It's on Flatbush Avenue, which isn't where I'm walking right now. Flatbush Avenue is to the right of me. Flatbush Avenue is also a main thoroughfare throughout the entire borough of Brooklyn.
Notes from our bells are different notes.
I just heard that rider remark that the city bike bells have different tones and notes. I haven't really experienced that myself, but hey, I guess what works, right? So at the end of Flatbush Avenue on the East River is the Manhattan Bridge. It was the last of the three East River bridges, the last of the three East River suspension bridges to be built after the Brooklyn and Williamsburg bridges. The name still stands as Manhattan Bridge, but many people have called the name meaningless because there's already a Brooklyn Bridge. And it didn't really hold any significance. It's a lot of cyclists today. Pretty cool, actually. It's a warm day, so many people are out now. So this is J Street and that is Tillary Street. Here's a two-way protected bike lane that isn't painted very well. Like many things in this city, the city could do a little bit better with the lane markings and infrastructure. It's a mean looking dog. Don't want to go near that dog. Off in the distance, you can see downtown Brooklyn is still under construction. Giant crane with multiple floors in that office building. There's a lot of traffic here. This bridge is notorious for traffic, as well as a pedestrian and a bicycle path that's shared and not very good for traveling. The city does have plans to increase the size of the pedestrian and the bike lane, but so far they're waiting on a study to determine whether the cables can support all the weight of the plans to widen the wooden deck. I think I'll just cross the street here. I need to get over that side anyway. Downtown Brooklyn is also a major transit hub, especially for buses and subways. So I'm about 2 blocks away from Brooklyn Heights. Brooklyn Heights isn't a part of downtown Brooklyn, most notably because of the lack of office space and commercial buildings in Brooklyn Heights. It's more of a residential neighborhood, but it's on the other side of Cadman Plaza East. Well, I guess the other side of Cadman Plaza is Cadman Plaza West, but you know what I'm talking about, hopefully. A block to the north of me is a World War II or I memorial, I'm not sure. And over here is a Korean War memorial. I'll just go by it really quickly. Now I'm just going to turn the camera around and show you this marvelous building. Kind of looks like a castle or a grand building, but it's actually a post office. And here is the memorial to the Korean War veterans. Many of these names are a little bit faded. So I'm walking on Cadman Plaza West towards the rest of downtown Brooklyn. Here's a close-up of 1 Clinton, Brooklyn Heights. This was the building under construction that was off in the distance before. So where I'm walking right now is actually the Brooklyn Borough Hall. It's about a 5-minute walk from here, but this was actually built in the late 1800s. So here's a public park, really nice. A very big TD Bank. So the Brooklyn Borough Hall, where I'm going to right now, was completed in 1848. So it wasn't exactly the late 1800s, it was the mid 1800s. And in January 1898, the city of Brooklyn, as I stated before, merged with the city of New York. So this building became known as the Brooklyn Borough Hall then. It's on Joralemon Street. It's a very hard tongue twister to pronounce, but it's a gorgeous building with a nice fountain in front. It also has its own subway stop called Borough Hall, served by the 2, 3, 4, and 5 trains. Many people here skateboarding around Columbus Park. Always nice to see some activity and people going outside to do things. Here's Columbus Park and a fountain at Columbus Park. Here's the Brooklyn Borough Hall. It's home to the Brooklyn Borough President. In addition to this Borough Hall building, there's a lot of other municipal buildings around here too. Many court buildings, many administrative buildings. So I'm actually going to walk onto Joralemon Street. I hope I pronounced that right this time. And then make my way into Brooklyn Heights. And I'll tell you a little bit about Brooklyn Heights then. Across the street from the Brooklyn Borough Hall is the Municipal Building of Brooklyn. Very grand building with many columns. There's many bus lines around here. I saw at least 8 between these 2 or 3 bus stops.
I don't want this stupid car.
There's a lot of activity here around the Municipal Building and the Borough Hall. Many stores, many restaurants. The light is red, so I can't cross. Even on a weekend, on a Sunday, there's a lot of traffic around here. Alright, looks like I can cross the street now. So actually 2 blocks north of me is Montague Street. Montague Street is actually the main commercial street for this neighborhood. This is Brooklyn Heights. Brooklyn Heights was actually known as Brooklyn Village originally. It's been a prominent area of Brooklyn since 1834. And as I continue along Brooklyn Heights, you can see many of the brownstone houses. Many of them were built prior to the Civil War. There's a lot of art galleries around here and lots of history. Hey. Vlogging? Yep, I'm vlogging. So here's the Packer Collegiate Institute. So a lot of this area is affluent and because of the regular ferry service between Robert Fulton's ferry service between Manhattan and Brooklyn, which was historically at the end of Fulton Street. And Fulton Street in Brooklyn actually continues as Fulton Street in Manhattan because of the historic ferry. If one were to take the ferry from Fulton Street in Brooklyn, they'd end up in Fulton Street in Manhattan. So even though there's a body of water between the two, the street still continues on either side. Interesting, that sign is misspelled. It says Joralemon Street, not Joralemon Street. And here are Brooklyn's famous brownstone homes and residences. Actually, if I continue a little bit further, about 3 blocks down or so, there's actually a fake building that's set up by the transit authority that hides a ventilation chamber for the IRT 4 and 5 trains. You know what? I'll just walk by right now. Why not? It's not too far from here. A lot of nice architecture around here. So Brooklyn Heights is partly called the Brooklyn Heights because it's suspended above the rest of Brooklyn over the East River. On the western end of Brooklyn Heights, there's actually a motor vehicle highway called the BQE, or the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. The great civil architect Robert Moses developed that highway. And in order to build that highway through Brooklyn Heights, there was a lot of pushback from the residents here. So in order to develop the Brooklyn Queens Expressway, a triple lever cantilever deck had to be constructed beside Furman Street. And I'll show you part of the structure when I go down there. So here is Hicks Street. Hicks Street along Joralemon Street is the last street where you can turn right and not get stuck trying to make your way towards the water or Brooklyn Bridge Park. Because here's a steep hill, and if you try to go down anywhere between here and Fulton Street, you won't be able to get down. So I'm going to cross the street here, which is a cobblestone street. Wait for this car to pass. So, do you see anything different here? Maybe, maybe not. But see anything different here? Okay, if you didn't catch anything, this is actually a fake building to a ventilation chamber. 58 Joralemon Street is part of the New York City subway system, and it's blended into the neighborhood. I don't see any doorbell on this building. The windows are all black. And here's a New York City Transit wet standpipe system for the Joralemon Street Tube. So the triple lever cantilever deck of the Brooklyn Queens Expressway is actually under some major disrepair. It urgently needs renovations, and the city has been debating for years how to best address the situation. Either way, it's going to cause a lot of traffic and not going to be an easy fix. This infrastructure has been crumbling for a while now, and it needs to get done. I mean, even just look at this concrete here. Part of it is coming apart. You can see a lot of the brickwork and the concrete exposed here. So this is Furman Street. A lot of the BQE here needs a major makeover. Whether it's peeling paint or metal corrosion or weathering, I can see why it needs to be replaced. Okay, traffic's clear. So I'm walking back up Joralemon Street, this time on an incline. This street is a very popular route for many people going to Brooklyn Bridge Park by the water. I'm actually going to be visiting Brooklyn Bridge Park later, but not this section of Brooklyn Bridge Park. I'm going to show you the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, and also Columbia Heights, which is the most expensive real estate in Brooklyn. It is the Millionaires Row of Brooklyn. Okay, finally, this is Hicks Street. I'm going to make a left, and then after a short while I'll be on one of the most expensive blocks, if not the most expensive block in Brooklyn. Here's the Grace Church, Brooklyn Heights. Now, if I were to make a left on that street there, it would actually be a dead end. I can't access the promenade from that part of the street. So this is Remsen Street. In a little while I'm going to make a right onto Pierrepont, and then it will be Columbia Heights. I see a lot of people with the stickers. Many residents here are opposed to the city's plan to fix the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, so they have stickers up to fix the BQE plan. They're calling it a highway to hell. Understandably, because this will completely change their lifestyle. I haven't even begun to show you the Promenade yet, which is actually half a block ahead of me. This is Pierrepont Street, but I'll just make my way to the edge anyway. Why not? It's not that far away, and then I'll come back for Columbia. So here is the Brooklyn Heights Promenade with the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway cantilever deck just below me. That ahead of me is Brooklyn Bridge Park. These buildings and residences have a fantastic view of Lower Manhattan. There's the Brooklyn Bridge in the distance, where I just walked from the entrance. Lower Manhattan, South Staten Island Ferry, South Ferry, World Trade Center in the background. So I'm gonna make my way back onto Pierrepont Place and then Columbia Heights, just to show you the block. So here's the end of Montague Street. There's a building called the Brooklyn 57, which was the original name of Brooklyn. So here's a very, very cool artifact of history. This is the land where Fort Chimneys stood on, the house occupied by General George Washington as his headquarters during the Battle of Long Island, in which the Council of War was held August 29, 1776, when it was decided to withdraw the American army from Long Island. So General George Washington abandoned Long Island. So here's Pierrepont Place, part of the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. We need a better way than a 6-lane highway, no highway to hell. Fix the BQE plan. So here is the start of Columbia Heights, which is only 8 blocks long and boasts some of the most expensive real estate in Brooklyn. So some of my information may be old as I'm reading an article from 2012, but there were homes here that sold for $11 million, $10.75 million, and they bought the properties here because of the views of the Statue of Liberty and the boats and all the ferries, the Manhattan skyline. Many wealthy individuals from backgrounds such as Goldman Sachs and FAE Holdings own these properties. The residents here actually are a little bit more secluded than Manhattan because this is a very, very quiet street. I'm wondering why there are a lot of books on people's stoops. I saw that happen back there too. Here there's actually a mixture of brownstones and nice homes like these. Whoa, that's a big dog. So I actually wonder if I'm able to access the promenade from here, because I don't want to walk on Columbia Heights the entire way. Oh good, there is an entrance here. Okay, here it is, the Brooklyn Heights Promenade. I actually see two jet skiers off in the distance, as well as a yacht. I'm gonna look down here. Those are cars traveling on the highway. Up here on Brooklyn Bridge Park, that was converted into basketball courts, as well as other recreational facilities. I see handball courts there. It'll be a shame for sure if this promenade was destroyed in order for the Brooklyn Queens Expressway to be fixed. But I guess in a city this large, not everybody can get their way. I personally don't know myself what the best way is to fix the BQE. There have been plans to completely shut it down from Furman Street on. But then there are those who say that it will cause more traffic onto the local streets, or they'll just close one level at a time. It's actually a grim situation. So here is the end of the Brooklyn Heights Promenade. All right, that kid's doing the floss. I think someone's been playing a little bit too much Fortnite. Here's the Fruit Street sitting area. It's interesting because the street I just passed is called Cranberry Street. So I assume there's a lot of trees that flower here and bring fruit to the area once it blooms. So there's the Harry Chapin playground across the street from me. So to the left of me, historically, is the entrance to the Brooklyn Bridge Park. But the Squib Bridge is temporarily closed for renovations. It's really horrible, but you need to do at least a 3 or 4 block detour in order to access Brooklyn Bridge Park. So Brooklyn Bridge Park didn't always exist. It was never always a beautiful waterfront owned with parkland and nice amenities. Historically, it was a industrial and commercial waterfront. Many factories set up shop along the river to take advantage of the waterways with the direct access to Manhattan and the East River. Brooklyn Bridge Park really only came to fruition through years and years of development between the 90s and the early 2000s. It's actually very, very steep here. So I'm just about to enter the neighborhood of DUMBO, which is actually an acronym for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass.
Oh, do you guys walk up here?
There's different other New York City neighborhoods that also use acronyms. Most notably Soho, which is south of Houston Street, NoHo, which is north of Houston Street, Tribeca, which is triangle below Canal Street, Nomad, which is north of Madison Square Park, and Nolita, which is north of Little Italy. So here is Old Fulton Street, which used to historically be the end of Fulton Street, where Robert Fulton had his steamboat ferries. And there is the Brooklyn Tower of the Brooklyn Bridge. I'm looking up Fulton Street right now. Grimaldi's Pizzeria is on the corner of Front Street and Fulton Street, but it's under renovations right now. Shake Shack's directly across the street from me. This area is a lot more lively than it that it's recently been because of the spring weather, and people are all out to enjoy it. Here's some popcorn. So here's Furman Street. A few feet more and you'll hit the triple lever BQE deck where I just came from. So at the end of Old Fulton Street today, there's actually a ferry you can take to New York, to Manhattan, as well as further up the coast of Brooklyn and south of here. This is actually the New York City ferry landing of Brooklyn Bridge Park. The East River Ferry serves here, as well as the South Brooklyn Ferry. I think the Lower East Side Ferry also serves here also, but it costs the same fare as a New York City subway ride or a bus ride, although the fares are not interchangeable. So if you get off the New York City subway and want to take the ferry, you'll have to pay again, whereas if you took a bus right after getting off the subway, you get a free transfer. Or vice versa. If you got off the ferry and want to take the subway, you have to pay an additional $2.75. Those prices are, as of today, March 24th, 2019, subject to change. But here is the Brooklyn Bridge, Verizon building. This used to be home to the Brooklyn ice cream factory, and I have no idea what's going on with it now. It looks like it's closed, which is pretty sad because I really enjoyed their ice cream. If somebody knows what's going on with this company or this building, please let me know. It was such a big hit when it was here. So to the left of me is actually the River Cafe. It's not part of Brooklyn Bridge Park, and I can't continue on the waterfront up the coast of Brooklyn, so I'm just going to walk around here. So now I'm in DUMBO proper. Dumbo has been known by various names throughout the years as ⁴ᴷ⁶ Olympia, and ⁴ᴷ⁶ The developer who began its gentrification is Two Trees Management. At the time, it was led by David ⁴ Dumbo is actually part of the greater Vinegar Hill area, which is also part of downtown Brooklyn. Wow, the traffic here is unbelievable here. A lot of these streets are cobblestone streets, and if you dig up under these streets, or even during the current streets, sometimes you'll find trolley tracks and train tracks around this area because of all the industrial nature of this neighborhood that used to be here. But this area is an example of gentrification in New York City.
Here it looks like a church.
A lot of technology companies came into this area. The biggest one being the creative company Etsy. This is a popular spot for Instagrammers and photographers in New York City. Here's a view of the Brooklyn Bridge from below. The St. Anne's Warehouse. It's also famous for weddings and wedding photography. Up ahead of me is a recent art installation. It's called Bridge Over a Tree. It's very popular with children and families. In front of me is the Jane's Carousel. It was actually built in 1922 for the Adora Park amusement park in Youngstown, Ohio. And it was closed to the public in 1984. And the carousel was bought at an auction by the Jane and David ⁴ developer group, and it moved to Brooklyn for renovations. This carousel ride was opened in 2011. It's a very famous attraction for people here. You don't get too many tourist destinations here. Looks like this carousel ride is just finished. This building in front of me, it used to be an industrial building, but it's been reconverted into many shops and office buildings. You're also able to climb to the top of this building and get magnificent views of Brooklyn and Manhattan. There's the Manhattan Bridge with a looks like a northbound N or Q train going across. Many people here bringing out their pets to walk. Lots of joggers, skateboarders, bike riders around. That's what I like to see. People enjoying their time here in the city with friends, family. Now, because the Manhattan Bridge is all metal, the trains going across it, you could hear it for miles and miles. So where I'm about to go is Pebble Beach. It's my favorite beach in New York City, and you'll see why when I turn the camera to the left. Not often will you find a public beach in Manhattan, Brooklyn, with gorgeous views of the city skyline like this. There's a New York's water taxi making its way up the East River. You have to be very careful when you're climbing these steps because they're very steep. Here's the Brooklyn side of the Manhattan Bridge Tower. It's pretty incredible if you ask me. And now there's a subway, so it may be hard to hear me. Still a little bit wet here. Now this scaffolding is up because actually parts of the Manhattan Bridge came down here, so they want to protect people by putting up this scaffolding. New York City's infrastructure definitely needs repair. Now this used to be home of the Brooklyn Boulders, the boulder section. But as you can see, it's been completely closed off due to concerns about the Manhattan Bridge debris falling apart.
New York.
East Side, as well as the Williamsburg Bridge in the background. It's really a shame because this area used to be very, very lit up, and the scaffolding just detracts from the view tremendously. The city should go out and fix it. So here's some train tracks along the street of Plymouth Street. Here's the entrance to Brooklyn Bridge Park at Washington Street. And I'm going to walk up Brooklyn's most photographed street, Washington Street. People love taking photos here, but it's very important to watch out for car traffic because it is a one-way street going northbound. People just love the view of the bridge from this angle. So I don't know if you can see it, but the Empire State Building is right in between the tower. The Manhattan Bridge is in the background. And this street just gives a perfect angle of that view. The further you get up Washington Street, the better the view is, as long as you use a zoom lens. People here with professional photography equipment here. So over here the view gets even better when it's farther away. The reasoning because the Empire State Building gets closer and closer to the top of that middle section of the tower the further you go up the street. But actually that view may be gone in a few years because of a development in the Lower East Side. I forget which one, but Brooklyn's beloved view of the Empire State Building through the Manhattan Bridge may be subject to development and industrialization, just like the rest of New York. So here's the view of Washington Street from further up. This is Front Street. Personally, I've gotten great pictures up here, almost by I forget which street this is, the block up ahead, but about halfway up this block to 3/4 up the way up this block is perfect. So I'm about halfway up the block now, and there's the shot right there. You'll want to bend down in order to get it. There it is. The tip of the Empire State Building is perfectly in line with the tower. So if anyone plans to visit DUMBO and shortly, make sure to get your pictures in because this view may not last longer. So I'm going to make my way left onto York Street. Here's some construction going on down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass. That stands for DUMBO, as I stated before. Here's some nice murals under this part of the Brooklyn the highway. No, I think it is the BQE. I thought it might have been an exit ramp for one of the bridges, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Much of the paint is faded though, but it's still very colorful. There you can hear firsthand how loud the subway can get here. Practically right under it. So across the street is the entrance to the York Street F train subway station. It's the only entrance to the subway station as well as its only exit. It's a fire hazard to people who use it, but it's built so long ago that the city really has no other option but to keep it the way it is. But anyway, this is the end of this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. I'll see you all next time.